So, as expected, E3 has led to some juicy new details, pictures and gameplay footage from Gran Turismo Sport. We've had a new release window and all that kind of good stuff associated with what you'd expect from E3. However, what we're going to do in this video is break down a couple of those actual shots and some actual trailer footage to look a little bit deeper. Some new confirmed vehicles, some vehicles which perhaps we didn't know were going to be on the game, some which we may already have expected, but now we know for sure are featured, some new circuits perhaps, and maybe even a new form of motorsport. At least a new one to the Gran Turismo franchise. So, first of all, let's lead with that. What am I talking about? Well, there's a very brief moment in one of the highlighted trailers, which you can see here, featuring the Ford Fiesta rally car in what appears to be a Gymkhana-style arrangement on one of Gran Turismo's circuits. It looks like an oval circuit. And if that is the case, this could well be the first Gran Turismo title to actually heavily feature, or maybe feature in some form at least, competitively, the art form of Gymkhana. For those who are unfamiliar with it, without getting overly specific or technical, it's basically drifting a car, usually an all-wheel drive vehicle, but not necessarily always, around a tight technical course. Stuff like Ken Block is known for. He kind of made the sport wider known than just the pure fans, thanks to YouTube and his Monster Energy vehicles. This is an interesting change, because if that is the case, and that is what this trailer is indicating, then that will be a significant new form of, potentially, competition driving. And if that is the case, it could well end up being a very competitive form of, for instance, online racing, or career mode, or campaign mode racing, or motorsport, or it may end up being some form of perhaps driving mission, in a similar way to the cone-based coffee breaks in the past, built into the licenses, or such as the driving missions from Gran Turismo 4 and 5 in particular. Either way, it shows that they are putting that to the forefront. By having that in the trailer, they very deliberately showed that. So that could be interesting to see where that leads. Gymkhana certainly has plenty of fans. I personally prefer Gymkhana-style drifting to regular drifting. I like that technical side of things, and I look forward to seeing how that pans out. Maybe there will be Gymkhana-style variants of different racing circuits. Now, a Gymkhana circuit has been featured on Gran Turismo before, on Gran Turismo 4, but it was never really featured as a part of the game. It was just a track that happened to be there. So, we'll have to wait and see. The second new interesting thing before we get into the juiciness that is the new cars is a new circuit which has been confirmed, and the first footage of that new racing circuit, which is located at Lake Maggiore. Now, with those two interesting side points aside, two very big ones and potentially juicy ones, what about the new cars? Because there were certain cars which are very front and foremost in the trailer. There are others which are maybe hidden, maybe you only see them for a fraction of a second, some which are totally new, others which are just new to this game. We've already had some interesting cars confirmed, like the Lamborghini Veneno, for instance, in the past, cars which Gran Turismo has never had before. So what new ones were there in this trailer? Well, we had, interestingly, another Lamborghini featured, but not just in one form. Actually, in three separate forms you can see the Lamborghini Huracan featured in this trailer. There's the normal road-going form, which is probably going to be around an N600 class vehicle. We've got the Group 4 race car, which is slightly modified with some aero, some livery, to take on vehicles like the Mustang Group 4, various others, the Alpha 4C, those kind of vehicles, some of which are already in the beta, and probably most popularly and most significantly, the GT3 machine, which is doubtless going to be very popular, as it will be the first proper Lamborghini race car that we'll be able to use all the time. The Nomad Diablo GT1 was a cool car, but it was relatively limited in its range of effectiveness. This car will be much more competitive. Then we also had the Mercedes AMG GT in another form. Not a race car, because that has already been confirmed, and it is in the trailer again. The road version as well we already knew was on the game, but we see it in this trailer in the form of a brand new pace car. And the pace cars, of course, are always very popular on Gran Turismo. The Skyline R34 pace car originally, both with and without the roof lights, then notably the BMW M4, which took the performance to a whole nother level and made the fun factor, or the novelty factor of having a pace car actually somewhat more usable in racing. This will be interesting to see what it can do. It's got the novelty factor. Will it be able to win races? Will we be able to actually drive it or race it? We'll have to wait and see. I would suspect so. But again, we don't know for sure. And also we have another couple of variations of another existing car which was already confirmed, the NSX, the new shape Honda or Acura NSX, depending on which brand you want to support, in both Group 4 and Group 3 racing forms. Now, I've said for a long time that I believe this particular vehicle would be one of the fastest cars in the game. Now, in particular, that was when I was talking about it with the use of upgrades and tuning. I thought that that car would be what the Corvette C7 was like on Gran Turismo 6. That brilliant all-round machine which offered everything you needed from a performance car and was kind of the new hero car of the game. That may not be the case depending on the tuning of Gran Turismo Sport. We'll have to wait and see. But either way, it will doubtless be very competitive in all three of its forms, both around N600, Group 3 and Group 4. Then, next up we have a car which is personally my favourite of the entire trailer. This is a vehicle that I was not expecting to see at all, and from Gran Turismo's past and the nostalgia aspect, is quite an interesting vehicle, but one which most people probably wouldn't notice as being that significant, and that is the Volkswagen Beetle, Group 3 race car featured here. There doesn't appear to be a Group 4 equivalent of this car currently in the trailer, or a Beetle road car, be it an N200 or N300 vehicle. Now they may well be in there as well, but for now we have the Group 3 and it looks like a monster. You've got side exit pipes coming out of the wheel arches, a chunky body kit, and a very GRC style look to it. And from the look of the trailer, it can definitely take on stuff like the Huracan, the NSX, the Vantage, and various other full-on GT3, or at the very least Group 3, if they're not official real race cars, machines. That's pretty impressive for a Beetle to be taking those on. But why am I excited for that? I'm not a huge Beetle fan, but the reason why is because my favourite Gran Turismo game has always been Gran Turismo 2. That's where it started for me, and this will actually be the first time since Gran Turismo 2 that we have had a Volkswagen Beetle that can genuinely take on full-on GT car machines. Because back then on Gran Turismo 2 there was a Beetle GT race car with all-wheel drive and over 400 horsepower. It was an extremely quick car, but since then the closest we've had has been the Beetle Cup car, which is very limited in range of effectiveness. So this will be, perhaps not importantly to many people, but to some, such as myself, it will, the return of the extremely competitive Beetle to the world of Gran Turismo racing. So what's up next? Well, we also have another strong vehicle announced. It's a car which you could probably bet was going to be, and that is the Viper. And in particular, it is, not surprisingly, the newest form of the Viper, the GTS, which debuted in 2013. We have it in road form, Group 3 form, and Group 4 form. And the Group 3 is personally the one which I'm looking forward to the most, seeing as it is the Viper GT3R race car. That will doubtless be a highly effective, very competitive vehicle to take on the likes of the Mustang and the Corvette in particular, but also, of course, beyond America, to all of the other Group 3 machines. And based on how good the Viper has always been on Gran Turismo, there's no reason to believe that that will change now. Next up we have a rather interesting one. It's a car which, at least from what I've seen, hasn't had a huge amount of buzz around it, but it appears to be a Mazda 6 touring car style Group 3 machine, or a Mazda Atenza race car, depending on what market you're in. But that's an interesting addition. If that is correct, and my identification of the car is correct in the trailer, that will be an interesting twist, having more touring car style machines in that Group 3 class, or at least it is going up against Group 3 machines, that makes it different from just those pure coupes and sports cars. That's interesting. And it also bodes well for the future. Who knows if we may end up getting, for instance, Super GT cars, or DTM cars, or maybe even other forms of touring car like BTCC machines in there as well. Maybe not, but maybe. Next up we have two British GT cars confirmed, neither of which are overly surprising given that we already knew and had access to both of these in racing form in the beta, and they are both the Aston Martin Vantage S and the Jaguar F-Type in road-going form. We already, of course, have the racing equivalents of these cars in the GR3 or Group 3 class with the real Vantage GT3 car and the fictional Jaguar Group 3 car, and I've incidentally reviewed both of those recently on the channel as well. But if the race cars are anything to go by, the Jaguar in particular, then it bodes well for the road vehicles also. And we also see a number of vehicles confirmed in the released images which aren't necessarily featured in the trailer, such as our first look at the Bugatti Veyron, racing in the world of Gran Turismo Sport up against what appears to be Group 4 machines from Hyundai and Dodge, or SRT, with the Viper that we mentioned earlier. This is interesting because the Veyron specs go far beyond what these cars have, so it would appear that if the Veyron appears in perhaps more than one form, it may be available in a standard form, which is actually technically superior to this Group 4 machine, which will have to doubtless be heavily restricted, both in terms of power and weight, maybe with lower weight, but also significantly lower power, to allow it to race competitively but not to be too good, especially on the straights. We also have a couple of features in the released images which aren't in the trailer as well but are notable. The things which we already knew about, such as the scapes, where you can take photos of the cars in different locations. That's always been a very popular feature on Gran Turismo. And it's interesting to see that some of the older photo mode locations appear to be making a return, such as Opera Paris, which is interesting to see that make a comeback. And we also, of course, have some newer images of what we already knew to be the Livery Editor featured on the game, a feature which is totally new to the world of Gran Turismo, which a lot of people are understandably looking forward to. I'm personally looking forward to seeing how that integrates and how the mechanics work, basically how the camera moves around the car, how the placement of decals and liveries work, and how immersive it will be, how far you can go with the Livery Editor, whether it's just preset designs that can be changed around, or whether it's going right down to the bare bones, Forza style, to actually make your own decals. It'll be interesting to see. And last but definitely not least, we have a couple of shots and also some very, very brief footage, very brief indeed actually, it's one of the most hidden cars in the entire trailer, of some interesting Peugeots featured in the game. Peugeot isn't necessarily the #1 brand for most people, but many of their motorsport-based vehicles have been very competitive and very successful. Now we have the RCZ confirmed in pictures and what appears to be an RCZ-based Pikes Peak style rally car, which, if the road car is anything to go by, could be brilliant, especially given how good Peugeot Pikes Peak cars have been in real life, not just lately, but in the past as well. We also have, and this is the one which I mentioned being very, very briefly featured, what appears to be, if I'm correct, a Group 3 style Peugeot Rcz Racecar racing against the other machines. Now, if I've seen that correctly, if I've identified that car correctly, that could be interesting, because not a lot of light has been shed on that vehicle. You don't hear people talking about it. I don't believe it was a confirmed vehicle, but I may be wrong about that. But either way, I'm personally looking forward to seeing what vehicles like the Rcz Racecar and the Beetle Racecar are going to be capable of, because that's always been a part of Gran Turismo that I've loved. Those less obvious choices of vehicle, which sometimes turn out to be really, really good. Stuff like the Gillett Vertigo on Gran Turismo 3 and 4 in particular. But either way, we'll have to see, and we've got some good info from both the pictures released and the trailer. Once you break it down and look at it frame by frame, there are some interesting things to notice, not just features, but also tracks, cars, and potential new features such as Gymkhana, which could be coming to the game. So overall, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below about the new trailer and the new pictures released. Of course, we had more than one trailer. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of the other one with the very choppy editing style. I could see what they were going for with the retro Gran Turismo in the background, but for me, that one just didn't do it, mainly because of the audio. Overall, though, this was a cool trailer and certainly some cool pictures. And so that's about it. So if you'd like to check out other Gran Turismo Sport individual car reviews, rivalries between cars, and also in-depth reviews of the beta, then of course you can check those out on the channel and stick around by subscribing to see them as soon as they're released. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.